My name is Camille Tayada, and I'm a court interpreter in Alameda County, and I'm just chiming in because I overheard about the video arraignments done, over video, obviously, and that's happening right now. I've been in there, and I've actually done some of those interpretations. The only time it works is when it's all one-way communication, and the judge is just informing people of their rights and what the charges are, and that's it, period. There's hardly any two-way communication other than the person who's at jail confirming their identity, for example. That's it. But the second that they have any attorneys involved and there's any back and forth, the whole thing falls apart. Because then all of a sudden they want us to be interpreting simultaneously. They don't understand that it is not set up for that. And I have no idea what the person on the other end, the person in jail, if they're getting any of it at all. Any other discussion between the attorneys, the judges, I'm sorry, but they need training probably more than anyone on this stuff because they're not aware of it most of the time. Most of them are not. And so they don't stop it. It's very difficult for an interpreter to actually speak up in that situation because a lot of the time we just get shot down, as if we're being disrespectful in some way for interrupting when it's our ethical responsibility to do so. But really, those setups are only good for consecutive, and there's a lot more that can be said, but I think
you're concerned that basically, as a professional interpreter, the clients, the people who need interpretation in courts are not going to get proper professional interpretation services, which will threaten their case and put them in jeopardy.
A lot of things can happen. That can happen, or I don't know how they're thinking of implementing VRI. I don't know if they are thinking of having the interpreter outside of the courtroom, in which case, as it is, when we're in the courtroom, there are often things that interfere with us being able to hear what's happening. A lot of times we have to interrupt people because they speak over each other. It's literally impossible to interpret when two people or more are speaking at the same time. If we're somewhere else, this happens constantly. If anyone talks to people who actually do interpreting in our courts, which they really need to do more of, okay, because we're the ones who know we do the work. And this happens all the time. We're not going to be able to interrupt anyone. It's hard enough as it is. We're not going to be able to interrupt them, to ask them to not speak over each other or not speak so quickly. When we're appearing via video, we're not going to be able to hear very well. We're not going to be able to ask to see documents ahead of time. If there's expert witness testimony, a lot of times we're sent into a situation in which we have to interpret for an expert witness without even getting a heads up. Even computers need to be pre-programmed. A lot of that language we don't even know in English unless we take a look at it ahead of time, figure out what it means, and figure out how to interpret it into the language that we interpret into. And if we are actually on site, then we have a much better opportunity to go up to the attorneys ahead of time and say, hey, what's coming up? Can we take a look at this forensic pathologist report or the report on the ballistics expert, or things that are actually, it could be experts that are also on more obscure topics that we haven't run into before, whereas we often do. We're trained on things like ballistics and stuff like that, but there are other specialties that we may not be aware of. There are just a plethora of things that come up. Also, most of the communication, the important communication between an attorney and their client, is not happening during a hearing. Or it might even happen like a quick whisper while, let's say the DA is making an argument, and the attorney might lean over to their client, if the client is the defendant, let's say the public defender or the defense attorney, and ask, hey, is this or that true, or what about this? And if you don't have an interpreter there to interpret for those communications, then it's going to really hurt that case and the ability of the attorney to make their case. I could go on and on. I wasn't expecting to be.
Very stressful situation.
It is, and it's high pressure, and it's right. And sometimes, yesterday I was ordered not to interrupt. and how, and the DA at that time was speaking very, very quickly. It's understandable. They get in the middle of their argument that they're making, but in Spanish, for example, it takes, and I don't know what the source of this is, but I've heard, and it makes sense as a Spanish interpreter, that it takes 30% more words in Spanish to say the exact same thing as what you're saying in English. Add to that English is much more succinct language. You can say, a word that's 1 or 2 syllables in English might be literally 18, 20 syllables in Spanish. If somebody is speaking at 180 words a minute, we're speaking, if we can get it out even at, 250? And we're not just speaking, we have to process this stuff, and we have to reorder the structure of the sentences so that it makes sense in the other language, and we don't have a split second to think of, well, how is it that I say this one obscure word again in the language that I'm going into? So it's very demanding, and we need to be able to be present on site to do this job right.
I'm Alex Abella. I'm the past president of the California Federation of Interpreters, and I'm here at the offices of the Judicial Council of California. We came here to speak against a proposal that would replace interpreters in courtrooms with video remote interpreting. That is, that one interpreter in Salinas, for instance, would be interpreting for somebody in Siskiyou, or somebody in Mendocino would be interpreting for somebody in San Diego. We're opposed to that because we think it goes against the California Constitution, that ensures the right to an individual interpreter. Also because we think that it's not feasible. It would be a total waste of time and money. So that's one of the issues. We also wanted to make sure that the Judicial Council heard our call for better relations with interpreters. Interpreters have not had a raise for the last 6 years. We don't have COLAs like everybody else. So somebody who started 20 years ago is making the same wages as somebody who starts today. So we don't think that's fair. We have stalled contract negotiations. They're refusing to proceed with them. They're dividing us, and we just think that they have to be told, no, you have to come to the bargaining table, negotiate with us, and give us, a fair wage.
Now, a judge here spoke of some of his concerns about the introduction of technology in interpreting. What did he say?
Well, what that judge said, Judge McCabe, he raised some very important points, which is that VRI, video remote interpreting, has been used for sign language interpreters with a high degree of success. But that's because sign language itself is a visual language, while being a court interpreter is a combination of visual and audio as well. And when you're interpreting in court, you're interpreting for the defendant, and you have to interpret everything that is said, and you have to interpret from a number of sources, from the attorney, from the defendant, from the judge, from the jurors. And sometimes when I've been in court, I've been interpreting for a defendant who's been only 10 inches away, and sometimes I couldn't understand or hear what was being said enough so as to be able to communicate it to the defendant. So therefore, VRI, as envisioned right now, would not work. And those were some of the points that I think Judge McCabe was addressing.
My name is Terry Allen. I am a Portuguese interpreter. I speak Portuguese from the Azores Island. The issues here today regarding video, my opinion, it would be very detrimental to the people, because the meaning of the translation will be lost. I am one of those interpreters on the phone for about 20 years, and it is difficult to interpret on the phone. I personally don't like it. Some of the things are lost. The words are not correctly meaning translation.
And the Judge McCabe talked about some of his concerns. Did you agree with his questions?
Yes, I did. They were very valid questions that he was asking, and I hope the Judicial Council will take that into consideration and take that into consideration of the people.
And what is the effect if there's a loss of information or miscommunication to these cases? What's the effect to the client?
Well, most of my experience from the language that I experience, the effect is tremendous because of the loss of communication, the client not understanding exactly what's happening, so the justice is not being served.
So it's a detrimental, could be very
Very, very detrimental.
personally, it could be.
Devastation. Yes.
Do you know of cases where people have had that situation?
On my language, I know some cases, because my language is Azores. They have a different dialect in Central Valley, which is Azores, and the test is Brazilian. Has a lot of effect on our languages also. Yes.
So what do you say about, they're saying that they can save money, they can bring in these, television, computer systems, and it'll be a great saving of money. What do you say about that argument?
I believe they're more concerned about saving money than justice for the people. There is all about money. The same when I called Judicial Council regarding the test and not being in my dialect, I was told it cost $50,000 to redo the test. So therefore, they were going to redo it in my dialect. I speak Portuguese from the islands, and the test is Brazilian. They're concerned about money.
I'm Gregoria Lara. I'm a Spanish interpreter in Merced Superior Court. I am so proud that I was able to come here today because I did hear some very insightful comments, especially from one of the judges on the advisory panel. And I'm very encouraged that the body now installed in the Judicial Council is perhaps more aware of the issues that we are facing as court interpreters, that they do want to expand language access to limited English proficient, because I'll tell you personally, I have been in a court in the Central Valley where I have had to tell no to people who raised their hands because they need the Spanish interpreter, and on my list their names said no because they didn't meet the qualifications, and it feels really badly that you can't help people because what you want to do is help people.
And do you know of cases where people have been hurt as a result of the situation of interpretation, not having proper interpretation?
Absolutely. In my court, there was this lady who was there for a civil restraining order. I was outside doing the cases assigned to me in the criminal court. She approached me because she knows I'm speaking Spanish, and she said, "Please come and help me in the civil court." I said, "I'm so sorry, I cannot, but please go to the administration office, and if they say I can, I will help you." I saw somebody, a friend of hers, go to the admin office. They came back and they didn't tell me I could help or not. Nobody called me. Later, when I spoke to her again, she was almost in tears, and she said, "Now I missed a whole day of work. I drove 45 miles each way to my home. They are asking me to come back tomorrow, and I have to find somebody to interpret for me. I don't know what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to miss 2 days of work, and this is something I really need."
And so you're concerned that this introduction of phone and television is not really going to help the client in the system as far as professional interpretation?
If we have to do video remote interpreting, it has to be very short proceedings and very limited proceedings, such as arraignments. We do video arraignments in my court, and they're very short, and that works. But in adversarial situations where you have restraining orders, where people are speaking over each other, overlapping, the situation is very emotional. Video remote interpreting is not going to work.
I'm Lucy Flores. I'm a certified court interpreter. I am part of the unit of the California Federation of Interpreters, and I've come today to the Judicial Council to support my colleagues in that we want to be heard. We want to be consulted regarding VRI.
And what is VRI?
VRI is video remote interpreting that the courts want to implement without input from the people who are the professionals and who are the ones that will be using the VRI to access language to all the limited English proficient public.
And how is VRI a possible danger to professional interpretation and representation rights of people in the court system?
As interpreters in the courts, in the criminal courts mainly, we have parties that are interviewed or are giving testimony. Very often people talk all at once. Very often they are not very proficient. They're limited in their education. We take cues from their mannerisms, from their manner of speech. We can stop proceedings in that we can ask the court for time to consult either the person or a colleague, or make things clear so that we are understanding first before we can interpret. Should a problem arise, video remote interpreting will hinder our work in the courts. There are occasions where we're addressing more than one person. For instance, when the advisement of rights is given, we're addressing a group of people. How is VRI going to be used in that situation? We find that we really need to look at the whole picture. We need to be there from the moment it's implemented. That's what we need to do.